Marion. Oops, just get rid of that. Okay, I will share my screen and then we'll be off. She says, let's click the right button. And welcome to our session. Just a quick sort of agenda for what we're going to cover this morning. Obviously, introductions are underway. We're going to then talk a little bit about the habit loop and then apply that habit loop and some of the principles behind it to how we can apply lean and continuous improvement. We're then going to do a little bit of a breakout exercise, and then Elena's going to take over and start to talk about how we can link this to well-being, and then we'll just give you some little next step tips. If you could save your questions at the end, we've allocated some time for. So just a little bit about the university. There's our Vice-Chancellor, Professor Stephen Toot. He's just started his last year as Vice-Chancellor at the university. So the search is on for a new one. He's quite refreshing in terms of, he's very much about the university being defined by our future potential as opposed to our history, which is something that we really sort of engage with. Some key facts and figures, not going to go into too much detail, but we've been around since 1209. That's probably one of the biggest challenges we have, trying to implement continuous improvement at the university. There's all that history and all that baggage to go with it. We're not necessarily a massively large university, but we have complexity in terms of the 31 colleges, who are 31 independent entities that have a sort of mutually beneficial relationship with the university. As such, decision making can be quite complex. We've got just short of around 12,000 staff across the institution. The university itself is made up of 6 academic schools, a number of non-school institutions, and then some other organisations that are closely associated. So Cambridge Enterprise, which was set up in order to commercialise research from across the university, Cambridge University Press, which is where Michelle came from, Paper Assessment, and an investment arm.
Sorry, Linda, can I just say your kind of voice is going slightly coming and going, so I think it's like if you kind of present straight to the mic, it's a bit better.
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you.
Thanks, Marion. Okay, so Marion's given you a brief overview of the team, so I shall move on from that slide. And that's the point where I hand over to Michelle.
That was quick. Yeah. Okay, so you can click. So I'm not in control of any screens, so you'll probably hear my lovely and click as I asked Linda to move forward through the slides. So and click our first one. So today we're going to start off by looking at really the links between habit and culture, really. So how our behaviours shape our environments. We'll also look briefly at habits and embedding a lean culture. So where do habits fit into the context of continuous improvement? We've also got an interactive part of the session, just to warn you ahead of time, where we'll be inviting you to think about lean as a habit, but there'll be more information about that as we move through. And we'll finish up with briefly about how lean habit can actually enhance and affect our well-being. So this course and this content, I believe, was originally part of our well-being week, which was a special week at the University of Cambridge, and it was received very well. So we thought it'd be a nice thing to share in this space as well. So let's kick off and touch first on the power of habit. So you may have come across this phrase. It's often misattributed to Aristotle, so I got that right. We are what we repeatedly do. So excellence is not an act, but a habit. Basically, we get really good at the stuff we do again and again. So that stuff, or at least the act of doing it, becomes habit. Over time, those habits form more and more of our daily lives and activities. There was a study from 2014 that showed that 40% of our daily activities we perform every day in almost exactly the same situations. So 40% of our time is habitual. And click a little bit. Another thing we wanted to touch on is the idea of culture. So we often talk about changing culture, and I think it comes naturally in the way we work and our job contexts as continuous improvement specialists, and changing culture. So it's a fundamental aspect of lean management, and by us trying to permeate our institutions and organizations with lean and knowledge of continuous improvement, we hope then to create a culture of continuous improvement. But the idea of changing culture can be a very imposing one. So, us from 1209, the University of Cambridge feels like it's been around since the dawn of time. So that culture can feel impenetrable. So let's break it down a little bit. Culture is effectively the way things are done around here. It's what we know and how we do stuff. If habits create actions and those actions create culture, arguably then the first, and fingers crossed the only, step in changing that culture is to change our habits. And that to me feels a little less imposing. In theory, anyway, that's the idea. So let's talk a little bit more about habits and what they are. So some brain stuff. Habits are formed and stored in an area of the brain called the basal ganglia. This is a part which plays a key role in the development of memories and pattern recognition. It's worth noting that decisions are made in a completely different area of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. And once an activity has been made as a habit and those decisions have been made, it gets stored away in the basal ganglia to gather dust, and the brain starts working on something else. So habits are quick to form, and because of where they're stored, they can be very difficult to break. The human brain is naturally lean, and it's actually naturally very lazy, which if you think, the more we get to know about lean, the more we think it's just common sense and laziness, really. The brain is always looking for ways to do more with less, which sounds familiar to us all. And the brain will often give you the absolute bare minimum you need in any situation. So we've all been there. I once saw a work colleague in the bra fitting room of Marks and Spencer's in Cambridge, and we both looked at each other out of context with that confused, who are you? I know you, I don't know how, I don't know why, but I know your face, with our bras on. Just open mouth struggle as we tried just to make sense of each other in that moment. So my mind, and purely because it didn't need to do any more than that, only ever had this woman, Jackie, against one background and in one context. So if you put her in anywhere else, I was completely flummoxed, and so was she. Lazy brain, lazy, lean brain. It took ages for me to figure out where I knew her from. So, habits. How do they form? Charles Duhigg, who is one of our buddies, in his book and research, and we'll share a link to that later, I think we've got an image of it, suggests that a neurological loop governs any and all habits, and he calls this the habit loop. So the habit loop starts with a cue, or what triggers your habit. So this could be a time of day. So it's 3 o'clock, something happens at 3 o'clock, I go and get that muffin, or I go and get coffee, or I go for a walk, or I go for a cheeky cigarette, whatever is your vice. It could be a place, a smell, it could be a trigger, it could be another person or what they do. It could be an emotional state. It could be, I'm sad, I want wine, or it's 5 o'clock, I want wine, or it's Tuesday, I want wine, I just want wine. It could be something else that's just happened. So think about when do you check your emails in the morning? Is it when you sit down? How habitual is that motion? What happened before it was? The next stage of your loop is your routine. So this is the actual behavior of the habit. This is what you do and how you respond to that cue. So this is the checking of the email, the pouring of the wine on Tuesday, going to buy that muffin at 3 o'clock. And finally, we have the reward stage. So the reward is what makes that routine worth it, and why your brain felt the need to file that away in your basal ganglia. So Good habits to build sort of long-term improvement, as we know, are more challenging because we tend to need and just to crave, and it's human nature, to crave that more immediate gratification. So this is why bad habits are so sneaky, because they give us that quick hit. They give us that thing that we want. That reward is there, we can associate it, and habits form very quickly. This is where it's so crucial in building good habits to build in those quick wins and those quick challenges, or a sense of sort of incremental success to those longer term projects. So if you think about if fitness is your general goal, how do you build in those quick rewards based on that? And I know for Linda, it's about closing the rings on her smartwatch, or it's about completing a certain number of miles per day to not break your chain of success. I remember when I was losing weight successfully, it was that competitive weekly, see those numbers going down, and as friendly as we all are in group, secretly we just wanted to know if we'd beaten that person over there and done better. It was that sense of immediate reward, so that the end stage stopped being the focus and it became more about what we could see straight in front of us. Okay, so next we talk about the term keystone habit. So keystone habit refers to a sort of special kind of habit that can lead to a cascade, really, of positive changes and benefits. So if you click, we've got an example of one here, and I'll let you take that in. Keystone habits spark chain reactions, which effectively help other good habits develop and take hold. So as you can see here, the impact and the positive impact of exercise is multidimensional. It leads to, by default, a healthier diet because you want it, which in turn leads to improved mood. It leads to better sleep, which creates energy, which in turn improves mood. There was one, there was something just about keystone habits that I read, and just how important they are. Even the smallest habit can be a keystone habit. There was one example of bed making. So making your bed every day is an example of a keystone habit. And there was a study that said that bed makers are also more likely to like their jobs, own a home, exercise regularly, and feel well rested. So really crucial. So keystone habits in the context of continuous improvement, if you can click now. So keystone habits are often correlated with other good habits, as we've mentioned, and give that ripple effect in their impact. So they create positive effects that spill into other areas. You effectively get free stuff, which we all want and we all appreciate in our lives. And that sort of idea of continuous improvement and that good breeding good outwards. Keystone habits also enable small wins. So once you define that keystone habit, so remembering back to that exercise example, you can start to analyze and pull in some related impacts and start measuring those. And we all know with Lean, it's about never underestimating that power of those accumulated small wins. And with those small wins, you're giving people that instant gratification that bad habits are normally so good at giving. So you're borrowing the trick. Repeat, react and refine, which is almost your kata, your cycle, your improvement cycle. Ultimately, repetition makes you fitter. This is about practice, and we all know it. It's our kata, it's our cycle. Repetition makes you fitter. If you're able to recognize and adjust one habit, you naturally become more skilled in the action and the art of changing habits. So it's twofold, your benefit is twofold. You've changed a habit and you're also more likely to change another one because you know how to do it, you've got the knowledge. It's like learning to dance. It doesn't just make you a better dancer, it makes you a better learner. So it's the art of learning as well. Visualization is really important and really beneficial to visualize your keystone habits and those associated impacts. So whether that's process maps or posters, how do you give and how do you offer a single and obvious focus on that single habit and demonstrate that ripple effect to people around you as well, especially if you're trying to instill this within your teams. And a culture of excellence. This is about celebrating success. There's lots of things to celebrate once you understand your keystone habits and what you can achieve in relation to them. And you start to introduce a culture where this in itself is contagious. It's that we don't want to fail. So we don't want to break the chain. We want to succeed every week. We want to succeed every day. It's turning those habits into a culture. So keystone habits can be applied to all aspects of our lives, may they be personal or professional. It's crucial, as we know, just to recognise achievements and celebrate that success and motivate people to continue, because if they're not motivated to continue, they just won't, or they'll choose something that gives them that better sense of gratification. So good breeds good. So small wins are a steady application of a small advantage. Once a small win has been accomplished, forces a set in motion that favour another small win. And the images there are the power of habit. That's our friend Charles Duhigg, and also a bit of a guru who I'm a bit obsessed with and get an email every Thursday from, called James Clear, who has some amazing stuff about the idea of habits and changing stuff. Okay, so we'll be sending you off to breakout groups in just a moment to answer a couple of questions. But before that, we just wanted to share some outputs from some sessions that we did at Cambridge with roughly this content. We asked our people, our folks, what can you do to make continuous improvement habitual? So in a moment, we're gonna allow you just to read through some of those responses. So these are people's ideas on how they can build good habits. The list is definitely not exhaustive. We cherry picked some nice little ones, and well, when we send you off into your groups, we do obviously expect different things, and they are slightly different questions. But so we'll just give you a minute just to take in these outputs from Cambridge. And there we are. That's a bit of a visual summary. And apologies if you had my Teams little bling bling, if that's coming through. I never remember to turn those notifications off. Something always comes through. Okay, brilliant. So to the exercise. So we won't ask for and go around the groups for any feedback or anything, but when in Miro, you were all on the same board in your own sort of little frames there. So if you want to have a look at other people's contributions and what they did, feel free to navigate around that board and have a nose. If there's anything particularly pertinent or any questions that came out of it, or any points that you think are really valuable to share more widely, please do put them in the chat, and when we go through questions at the end, we can always cover them and share them more fully then. But thank you for that, and hopefully Miro wasn't too bad and it was a useful tool for you. We've become a bit obsessed with it at Cambridge. I'm going to pass you over to Elena now, who's going to take you through the final session bit around wellbeing.
Sorry, I've got a frog in my throat this morning. Still won't go away. So moving on to the last bit, this kind of links, and this goes back to what Michelle and Linda were saying, that we delivered some information about wellbeing back in Cambridge, and it went down so well that we kind of wanted to just share this as well. So it links to habits in a way, because it's looking at the aspects of wellbeing and lean and creating that habit and how that links to then wellbeing and improving wellbeing for people. So great, next slide. So I think linking it to well-being, there are a few areas where we can make it really, really clear. So the first is, and I think someone mentioned this in the chat just before we enter the breakouts, which was respect for people. So as we all know, it's the foundation blocks for lean, and a fundamental principle, and also part of the ethos. So, but to perhaps add a little bit more flavour to what you might have heard before, it's about three things really. It's from a wellbeing perspective. So leaders who trust in their people and in their capabilities, and giving them autonomy and empowerment just to get on with the job in hand. But it's also not about leaving people completely alone. But the idea of checking in with people, and it's a distinction between checking in and checking on, and not checking on people, but checking in with people, which is a subtle difference to the language. And checking in with people to help them to learn new ways and put new concepts into practice and remove obstacles and barriers to success. So checking in shows care and attention to position, and their position and their views and opinions and their value as a team member, supporting their overall well-being as well. So it has that real link. The thing about checking in though, is it has to be done, as we all know, with authenticity and sincerity, because we will all spot a fake check-in a mile off. The next is, you may have heard, it's been batting around for a while now, called psychological safety. And there's actually two people. So Karen Ross, who's a lean consultant and a founder of the Love and Kindness Foundation, and Jessica House, who's a psychologist and a mental health professional and also master lean practitioner. So they tell us that safety is the prerequisite for learning, growth, innovation and improvement. So when we all feel psychologically safe, we are able to be our true self in the workplace. So we will feel free to ask questions, take risks and experiments with things, and ask for help as well. So making that habitual, so making that respect for people habitual, in turn will also prove psychological safety. They also developed something called the 5 C's, which I'll just come on to in a moment. The next one is kindness. So along with the 5 C's, Karen Ross also says that showing kindness creates trust and shows respect. So it's all links back together. Like anything else we want to get better at, Karen says being a kind leader takes practice though, and that's not an opinion, it's science. In an article recently, Kindness and the Brain, we found what's the impact of kindness in brain functioning by Daniela Silva. Every kind act changes the brain in a number of ways. So it's increasing the feel-good hormones in the brain for both people, so giver and receiver. It activates that reward system that Michelle was talking about as well, of the brain to produce those feelings of happiness and satisfaction in what's happening. And it changes the functioning of the prefrontal cortex to increase the number of those neural connections, allowing those neural pathways and habits of kindness to form across those pathways. So the best way of being kind is just to actually start being kind, and then deliberately practice being kind every day, and find things to be genuinely kind about, and do it regularly. We thought there were a couple of examples where people have come up with in the past when we've done this session before. So it was where you think, oh, well, I am a kind every day, but actually there's a couple of specific examples. People, so letting others speak first in a meeting when actually you're always the one that speaks first. Actually sit back and see if somebody else who normally does sit back and doesn't speak to the end, allow them to speak first. Actually, that's just one simple way of being different to how you normally behave, to be kinder. And then checking in with people, which goes back to the respect for people. And making those new habits really stick as well, and making it habitual. So people know where they stand, so it's not going back and forth from one kind of behaviour to the next. Next comes sort of that time to think. So reduction of, I think what we all have is that mind chatter, that stuff that goes on in the back of your mind and keeps nagging at you all day about things you haven't done and things that you still need to do. And our minds are amazing things, but they can also be really, really unhelpful by telling us things during the day which we just don't need to know. And sometimes forget because we're focusing on other things as well. And it just keeps popping up. We then lose concentration on that thing that we're focusing on because our mind throws all sorts of curveballs in and starts to chatter away in the background, leading to sort of stress and overwhelm. It's happened to me very recently, just this week, flooding in a charity that I'm a trustee for. So dealing with emails and insurance claims and meeting people and being at the conference as well. And so it just overwhelm and sort of stress going on in the background. So reduction of the mind chatter, whatever you can do to reduce that, because you can lose control over your thoughts. And it could be as simple as sort of maintaining a calendar, the act of listening and prioritizing your meetings, tidying, 5S your life, sort, shine, standardize things so that you can approach the day with a sense of structure and order. And obviously that lifts your spirits and boosts your sense of control and therefore your well-being. Thinking about how to apply 5S to your mind. And empowerment, essential and links to people. Empower means to make stronger, giving the individuals opportunities to create and be creative. And then lastly, celebration. So thinking, don't forget, we talk about success and celebrating the small wins. And actually continuous improvement favours that small incremental change and those small things rather than those huge big initiatives. And psychologically speaking, actually a small win is the same as a big one and carries weight in terms of our emotions. So each of the small wins is achieved, celebrate them, however small. So that's the link to well-being. I just wanted to touch then on now the 5 C's. I'm not going to talk through them in considerable detail, but these are the 5 C's in terms of psychological safety. So as we start to go through, just sort of think about ways to practice these, especially if you're a leader or a manager of others, and how you make them habitual and how you make them standardized. So clear expectations, how often we're not sure about what's expected of us. We have lots of things to do. What should we do first? What should we do last? What are the steps? When it's not clear of our expectations that we're putting on ourselves and others, it can become quite stressful. So having a clear sense of that. Connecting regularly. Karen and Jessica talk about asking people to connect, check in at least once a day. As human beings, we're sort of wired for that connection, which in turn creates that environment for us to learn and to thrive. If we end up not being connected and we feel then a little bit lost and less nurtured. So connecting regularly helps us feel connected to something bigger than ourselves as well. Caring genuinely, sort of harks back to the last one about the cut, and also to consistent kindness. So caring genuinely, live genuinely, not lip service, care about people as whole people, allowing them to give the best of everything that they do. Even when we don't agree with others sometimes. So it's attempting to see the other's point of view by looking for similarities rather than the differences. Reminds me of Stephen Covey and habits, the 7 habits there. And so seek to understand before being understood, always finding win-wins in every scenario. And then consistent kindness. So harking back to the last slide, empathy and compassion for others in their environment. And actually just last week, I went to David Suchet's in Cambridge. He did a talk about his character Poirot and how he came up with the character Poirot and his Shakespearean background. And actually, he talked about the word encourage. And I sort of thought, oh, encourage and empowerment, when you encourage others. And he said the word for him meant that you're filling somebody else with courage, which I thought was a really nice way of describing what encourage means. And we encourage people in Lean all the time, but it's filling another with courage, which I thought was really nice. Co-regulating emotion, and that's the process of matching people's emotions with other people. So you help to regulate the other. That just reminds me of being on a flight. I don't really like flying. And then being in turbulence, the only person I look at are the air stewards walking up and down. If they look okay, then I'm not panicked. So being that person to co-regulate panic and co-regulate other people's emotions around you when there might be chaos or disasters, or you're needing to work through a crisis together. So there's always that sort of pacing the conversation and genuinely showing empathy by understanding where they're coming from. And truly listening, being that sort of global listening on the surface. We always do that when we're listening to other people. We're always thinking about the thing that we're going to say in response, rather than truly listening to what actually they're saying. Yeah, improving our listening skills fourfold. I think everybody could have a look at that. So Karen and Jessica tell us that these sort of the 5 C's is like the DNA, as well as 5S, I think. I like to sort of link 5S and 5 C's together. So the organisation of your workspace and the organisation of your mind. So the DNA of Lean and what we need to do to embed those. And of course, it's all really nice in theory, those two last slides. So it's deliberate practice, building habits, and even just being aware of those is a start. So psychological safety is met, then our well-being will certainly improve. So that's the link to well-being. I think I'm going to hand back to Linda for finishing off.
Thanks, Elena. So just to sort of wrap up, so what now? Remember that habits are key. Small habit shifts lead to much bigger changes. So by consciously building and stacking up new habits over time, that will help us to sustain our well-being and effectiveness. So in summary, we have Lean, we have continuous improvement, our continuous improvement approach. We have the habit loop, we have well-being, and all of those hopefully contribute to well-being generally, both at work and at home. There's a nice little YouTube video. We'll make sure that the slides are accessible so that you can access all the links. Other than that, I'm going to stop sharing and say, are there any questions?